87% of realtors that get into the business get out of the business after 2 years. That does not exist in our world.
We have massive visions around growing our businesses, and we are always looking to add talent to our world. We do everything in our power to ensure the people we surround ourselves with defy the odds, get into production, and build massive lives for themselves.
We have interviewed some of the top realtors in the world. If you're a new realtor, a top producer, or CEO of a mega team, Sales Beast Podcast is your blueprint for success.
With locations all across Canada, reach out to us to talk about partnership and opportunities. We are looking forward to it.
Yes, I'm the boss.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Sales Beast Podcast. I am honored today to be here with Drew Woolcott, someone I look up to a lot, someone who I see, I just told you this, I see you every day at least 10 times on my way to the office.
Yeah.
you and your wife. And
Sorry about that.
That's okay. That's okay. Yeah, but you're someone I've looked up to for quite some time, and recently through your son, as I mentioned, I've gotten to know a lot more about you guys. We're in the same business. I was talking to Peter about best practices for recruiting, things you guys are doing that are working, things that we're doing. And ever since you came on my radar, which you truly came on my radar at your event a couple months ago,
right?
I'm hearing behind the scenes from agents that are with you or considering joining you, how great your operation is over there.
Shit, I'm very humbled by all of this.
Yeah, I'm not even making that up. My kid's nanny for the summer.
Okay.
Her mother, considering joining your team.
Oh, really?
Has a friend on that's part of your group, and that's where I really learned a lot about you guys.
Wow.
I've never heard an ill word about your group. So.
Well, that's actually an ambition of ours, is kind of to play the long game and do the next right thing, even though, it's not always the most profitable thing. It's not always the flashiest thing. It's not always the most interesting thing, but over the long run, you can gain a lot of ground.
Yeah. So when I was at your event, in certain ways, you remind me of me. So a lot of realtors today, they focus on social media. There's repeat referral agents. You struck me as one, when you started, you were somewhat old school, hustle and grind. I think you were doing a lot of cold calling, a lot of work in your database. Can you speak to how you got started in the business and what was the foundation initially?
Well, I mean, I got into real estate the way everybody gets into real estate. You cut off all the other viable alternatives, and then you have one left.
Yeah.
I had sold a small, I had sold a company, and I had some capital, but I had, a growing family, 3 young kids at the time, that were chewing through that capital pretty quickly. I don't think I had any exceptional willpower, but I had necessity, and necessity will take you a long way. So I went in, and I think I was too shy to sort of reach out to my sphere of influence and my friends, and I wasn't sure of my capabilities. So the next best thing to do was to reach out to strangers. And it's interesting now that you're on a podcast, but the antecedent of podcasts were, back then you would get tapes from different coaches. And they 201 seemed to say that, well, what you should do is cold call and or door knock. And I think I was too, shy to door knock enough, and I just cold called people. And I cold called them for hours and hours and hours. So I made a very simple agenda. I would call from 9 to 11 every morning, and then I would cold call 2 nights a week, and then I would collect leads. To make a long story short, ultimately, after some time of doing that, you end up with more business than you can handle, and you have to start looking for ways to help, to have people help you do that. So my wife came in very early, first as I hate to use the demeaning word of as an assistant, but an administrator, whatever you will. And then, we brought in an actual administrator. She got her license. She started into forms of prospecting as well. And then we had to hire agents to handle the business that we had. And it's really that simple. I think in all of these real estate businesses, you know, once you master the art of lead generation, everything else can look, everything else in your operation can be covered up, can look very good, provided that you generated enough leads. You know, the closing rate is 70% or the closing rate is 80%. But if you generate twice as many viable leads as the next guy, the closing rate becomes irrelevant all of a sudden.
Absolutely. And through my conversations with Peter, it sounds as though prospecting is still one of the core foundations of your business today.
Well, it's interesting. So pre-COVID, we got very much away from prospecting. We got fat. We had large databases that we would nurture, and I don't mean heavily nurture, but you know, we would just sort of kick the can down the road. And and people have changed too since COVID. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but so we had a fair-sized team of agents, I don't know, on the order of 20 maybe pre-COVID, and nobody was really doing very few people were doing any serious prospecting on the team, both intra-database and extra-database. Very few people were doing it. And then the market changed and the number of transactions dwindled. And you know, we're real estate geeks. Like, we're not going out of business. We're staying in, and we're going to make the changes that need to be made. And we went right back to the fundamentals. And now, you know, Peter has been very instrumental in this, and I can't take any credit for it. That is, in getting people back into prospecting and setting minimum requirements for them, and then, you know, making people accountable for the minimum requirements they set, getting them into activity so that they don't have a chance of failing. And that's is really as fundamental and as simple as that.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you speak to, I talked to Peter briefly on it, but the 2-minute conversation and how tracking 2-minute conversations has positively impacted your business?
I certainly can, but I want to be clear that this is Peter's baby and not my baby.
Yeah.
And maybe in conjunction with Justine, and maybe in conjunction with coaches that they have. Justine is my daughter, who's the general manager and very significant part of this thing. You know, as much as Peter is. So they, you know, people would call and call and call. And it's interesting, pre-COVID, that used to be sufficient. So it used to be sufficient to call somebody in a database 3 times a year and ask them, you know, are you selling, essentially? Maybe some limited script work, but are you selling? Are you selling? Are you selling? Can I help you? I'm thinking about you. Can I help you? But people are now, I think, barraged with other forms of advertising. So, you know, certainly through the internet, on their phones, at their doors, everywhere. And you have to stand out somehow or another amongst all that noise. And one rubric that seemed to work for some larger teams in the US was this notion of talking to people for at least 2 minutes. Because when you get them to 2 minutes, like, you have to go beyond real estate and you have to go into relationship to get to 2 minutes. And you have to be able to ask questions, and you have to be able to develop some sort of an affinity with the person on the other end of the phone. And it is remarkable the magic that happens after that 2-minute mark. So we use software that tracks the agents. Anybody who uses it can track when they get to a 2-minute call. And then, of course, you can reverse engineer it or look at it in the rearview mirror. And you can see that those that get to enough 2-minute conversations get to appointments and get to transactions. And the irony, or the paradox of it, I suppose, is that those agents have a much better time of it than, you know, asking questions that they consistently get a no to, because there's much more of a human element to it. So that's been a very, very significant thing. And then it informs all of the other conversations that agents have. So if they do that work, and it's not easy work to get to, but if they do that work, it's not easy work to master, that is. But if they do master that work, it informs other conversations that they have with clients. And it keeps the focus on the relationship, which again, if you take it full circle, is really all that the client wants. I mean, competence is a given among most agents, but are you concerned enough about my long-term care to do right by me is, I think, a deeper question that a lot of clients have. And this 2-minute conversation bespeaks getting to that point with a client, if that makes any sense to you, what I'm saying.
Absolutely. I think you guys used to coach with Marianne Gillespie.
For a very short period of time, actually.
Yeah. So she was my coach when I got into the business.
Okay.
She taught this framework of 4: family, occupation, recreation, dreams.
Okay.
And I would use it when it was comfortable or when the opportunity presented itself. I feel like this 2-minute conversation would force you to use Ford and force you to ask questions. And so asking questions is when the relationship is truly built.
Yeah, and it's nuanced too. I mean, you also have to develop the sensitivity to care. Like, you just can't ask the question vacuously, is what I've found. You have to somehow, I don't know. For example, we do market evaluations in 2 steps. And the first step, we really don't want the agents to talk about value or commission or anything material whatsoever. So it takes all of the pressure off of those conversations. And to the extent that they can go in there and form a relationship with a client, they have the deal, or they have the transaction, or they have the listing. But if they go in and try and ink all of those things at once, the closing numbers go way down. And I can't explain what the mechanics are in behind it. I just know that the human element is so important. And to be honest with you, like, I'm the opposite of that. Like, I'm kind of an automaton. But at my best, when I get over myself, I can get into that headspace of being, right, I don't know what it is, simpatico with the client. And when people are able to do that, when agents are able to do that, their numbers go way up. When they can let themselves go enough to care about the client and not the outcome of the conversation, they do better and better and better. I know these things are fundamental, but I think the industry got very much away from these things over the last 20 years or so, certainly the last 15 years. And now there seems to be a détente where everybody's going back to it, right?
Yeah. I was taught to go in, close the appointment on the first meeting. If you don't get it closed, your odds of getting it closed go down significantly. But I can imagine with your philosophy, in that first meeting, if you're building rapport, when you go the next time, you've shown the person that you truly care about them and their situation. When you show up for appointment number 2, it's almost like a friend has arrived. And we want to work with friends, people that we don't care about us. Say.
Well, absolutely. And that's built on the premise of, who do you let into your home? You let a friend into your home.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you automatically have a leg up. And then, when they do the first walkthrough, it's under the auspices of gathering information about the home. But, they're writing down everything that the client says, which is, a very nuanced way of saying, I care about everything that you're saying. And they ask questions, but not in a, we're going to trick you way. I mean, they're really trying to tell them, or at its best, not that I tell them. I mean, what the hell do I know? But at its best, if you can throw all of the outcomes away and just try to have an evening with somebody on a human level, and that's why we really don't want them to talk about price or commission or comparables or staging or anything. Just go in and form a relationship, and everything else will work out. I mean, you can mess up on the price and you can mess up on the commission, but if you have the relationship, you have a hope of salvaging that. Now, you can be right on price and bang on commission, and if you don't have if the seller doesn't have an affinity for you, you really have nothing. because
Absolutely.
shop that anywhere, right?
And is this method of operating, is that how you operated when you started your business, or is this something new
Yeah,
to you?
that's how I've operated, and that's how we have tried to get our team members to do that. And in fact, we audit it, we look for it, we insist on it.
Okay.
And it informs every aspect, and that is, rigor, right? So it also shows the client rigor. If you go in there, if you go in there, you take notes about the property for an hour, you form a relationship, then you go back and you bring the results of your homework, and you've consulted with people on the team, and you can share the results of that consultation. It's just a lot that's being brought to the table. I mean, it used to be that, you'd find the odd agent and there was a sort of an arrogance to it. Like, I don't need to look at comparables. I don't need to know anything. The price is like 1,495, right? Which is something nobody in the world actually knows. And I think the public has figured that out over time.
And it sounds like all of this process starts with that 2-minute conversation. Within your organization, what do you do to hold agents accountable to that? What is the software that you use to ensure
Well,
is it the
we use Follow Up Boss, and that has the capability to track the length of a conversation.
okay.
So it's a very simple metric that you can search any agent's numbers on and determine how many of those they've done. Now, agents that are newer to the team are not eligible to receive any leads unless they do a certain number of those 2-minute conversations in a week. So when we bring new agents on, I mean, we know that is elemental to their success. So, I mean, it starts with the interview. We tell them exactly what they're going to be doing. That's one of the many things that they're going to be doing. And I think Peter starts with them day one and gets them into that calling. And of course, the first time they do it, they're terrified. Now, they're not cold calling people. They're calling into a pond, if you will, of, I don't know, some 18 or 20,000 people that have in some way interacted with our organization over the years. So there's name recognition when they call through. So they get accustomed to that in very, very short order. And if they're not going to take it on, it's not going to work. But we don't have very many failures on that aspect. That's for sure.
It's really, really interesting. It's something I'm hearing from a lot of different teams recently. So I've fallen into the trap of tracking everything. It becomes overwhelming.
Yeah.
It seems as though you may have stumbled upon one of the few things that really matters when it comes to tracking KPIs.
I mean, if you track that, it takes a certain amount of attempts to get to a 2-minute conversation. And we know all those numbers, or at least somebody knows those numbers enough that when you set out a minimum, it bespeaks them having made all of those other attempts. So it bespeaks a reasonable effort. It all stems from, like, you've got to talk to, I think you've always had to do this. You've got to talk to 5 or 10 people a day to get anywhere in real estate. And you've got to talk to them on a deep level. That doesn't mean you've got to call 5 people and say, do you want to sell? And have them say no. I mean, what's that worth? Nothing. You haven't advanced your nor their lot in life at all by doing that. But if you can get somebody on for a couple of minutes a day and do it with some consistency, things fall out of it. You'll get new agents. I mean, this happens all the time. You get a new agent, call in, and call somebody that somebody else called a month ago who wasn't moving. Like, this sort of thing happens, and maybe Peter talked to you about this. This happens all the time. They talk to somebody early because sometimes they'll record some of these conversations. So you'll have somebody talk to a prospect who will start the conversation by saying that they're not moving at all. And then the calling agent will show some empathy and then move on to other questions. And then something like a hypothetical, where if you, if you were to move, where would you go to? And then by 2 or 3 minutes, that client is saying things like, our daughter's moving in the fall because she's going to school, and we're going to need to sell it then. I mean, this will be like in July, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So they have a lot of no's in them, and why would they release intimate details to a stranger? So I guess it's just breaking that down, and once they realize, I don't know what it is, like that you're hearing them, that you're not simply after dollar signs, that you're going to stay with the conversation even though you have a no on dollars, then they release dollars to you. It's actually bizarre.
Yeah, strange, eh?
Yeah, it very much is strange. Yeah.
Find sometimes too with the timeline. You'll speak to a potential client and they'll say, I'm not looking to sell for a long time. And then that simple phrase you mentioned, if you were to move, where would you go?
Yeah.
And after a few minutes, you realize a long time to them is 2 months.
Yeah.
And every other realtor in town has skimmed right over it. There you have a listing in 2 months' time.
Well, yeah, that, and yeah, they've said no, and that, and they don't know, or something changes, or whatever. But if you make some sort of a relationship, they're more apt to call you back if something does change. It comes from, I used to get delivered to me once a week, I think it was, in hard copy, all of the people that were in our database who had either bought or sold with other people, because they would just do an audit.
Mm-hmm.
And that number was infinitely higher than the number of transactions that we did.
Yeah.
And so, like, we just weren't getting to them. So, like, everything that we had, their phone numbers, we had their contact information, we even had the story of their lives, but we couldn't get anything out of it. And now we get much more out of it. The deeper we go, the deeper we go. It sounds so fundamental. Like, why did it take years to figure that out? And it's not me that figured it out. Why did it take 2 generations to figure it out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So at what point in your business did you guys pivot to the mass marketing, the billboards, buses? I think that's been going for as long as I've been around, but it seems like you guys have put your foot on the gas.
That's been going for like 25 years or so, or 25 years. Well, it wasn't a pivot. It was a gradual change. It started out with an ambition to make it easier to obtain sales in a certain market. And then I felt that we sort of perfected a marketing plan, if you will, or an approach in one market, which was Waterdown. And then we took it over to Burlington, and that worked very well. And then we took it over to Hamilton, and that worked very well. And Dundas and Ancaster. I mean, not that we're the biggest players in those markets, but we have a significant market share in them that, there's a viable business plan in them, right? But we started that pretty early. I mean, and that's got a lot to do with listening to the coaches of the time. And these are names, back then it was Brian Ferry and, his ilk. I think Tom Ferry, or was it Mike Ferry? Yeah, Mike Ferry. Brian Ferry is the artist, right? Mike Ferry, now his son Tom is around and runs that organization. Yeah, it was just really an attempt to gain market share, an attempt to generate leads. Because at a certain point, you hire agents, and then you need to keep them active, or you don't have profit and you don't have agents. I mean, and to this day, it's very difficult to tell you whether, for example, a billboard works. We can track certain things that we do, such as press, and such as the press that we generate ourselves. We deliver our own newspaper, and we can track that pretty closely. Obviously, it works, or we would cease it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also interesting now, those spaces have been abandoned by many people. So they can actually be more lucrative. because people have run out of them, right? I think in an attempt to find cheaper advertising online, but now online is crowded.
Yeah.
It used to work spectacularly when when you were more or less alone at it, but now not so much.
Could it also be the barrier to entry? You need a big budget to play with, I would imagine, in order to move into the billboard space. And with the pullback in the market, I've noticed there are only three of you that have
Yeah,
really
so
seemed to push
that's
forward.
a very good point. When we take on any media, we try to be one or two in it.
Hmm.
Because if you're three or four, you don't get noticed, and the returns diminish dramatically. So
Yeah.
I guess it is a barrier to entry.
And then obviously you generate leads through that form of marketing. What benefit is there to your agents? I would imagine when they go sit at the listing table and meet a prospect for the first time, that prospect's very much like me, and they've driven through the city for years and have seen your face. Does that increase the
Well, I mean,
conversion?
they have they still have to win the business on their own merits or on our own merits, but I suppose it makes them have to say less, and it softens their sales cycle dramatically. So they come in as a known entity. I honestly don't know how a single agent, like I think it would be very tough as a single agent to break in these days, because a lot of these teams have made themselves so well known, and they have a lot to offer. I mean, they have a lot of marketing power to offer. So on our team, we do a lot of non-brand advertising. That is a lot of property advertising that is very attractive to uh, vendors. I don't know how a single agent can compete with some of those things that require scale.
I think it's becoming harder and harder as time goes on.
I know that there's a lot of like a strong uptick in the number of people that come and want to work on the team. It's remarkable actually over the last 6 or 8 months. Now, Peter's also been working at that too, and that that it may not be all organic, or it may not even be partially organic.
I think there are a few things people are looking for. Well, one is leads. I'm sure you guys have experienced this. It's a lot harder to come across a qualified prospect in today's market than it was in
It
the
is,
past.
and we can't supply enough leads for everybody on the team. There's no question. I mean, we can give everybody some. The way that we distribute leads is equitably. So if you're on the team, you have the same access to leads as if you're brand new on the team, you have the same access to leads as the person who's been here the longest. And that's all transparent, because that can create no end of trouble when it appears as though some I don't know, despot is determining leads at their own
Hmm.
will. Okay.
Yeah.
And a couple things happen, and we used to distribute leads that way. You think that so and so is good at this, that, or the other thing, so you only give. Let's say that you think that an agent is good at farms, so you give them all the farm leads. Well, first of all, they may not really be good at farms. Second of all, they're never going to learn anything else. Like, the only capital that we have is the agents. So we want them, as soon as we can, to be dealing with, vacant lots, farms, development land, single family houses, townhouses, townhouses, condos. We want them to be dealing with those things right away, so that their experience is well rounded. And I believe that even if you're selling a detached home or buying a detached home for somebody, the more you know about the value of the lot, the better your client is. So one element to distributing those leads, not by match, if you will, but randomly or consecutively, is that everybody gets well-rounded knowledge. But the other significant thing that happens is, this is a fairly large team, but on a team like this, if it's a closed box, if it's an opaque system, even the person that's getting the most leads thinks that they're getting the fewest leads. And
Hmm.
so what happens is, most agents walk around with a ready excuse about about why they're not doing well. And then it informs their ability to act over time. So the system is rigged, therefore I can't sell is a mantra that might go on in somebody's head. Even subconsciously it happens. Now, if you take the reverse opposite of that, and if people have transparent and equal access to leads, and the guy beside you, for example, is selling twice as much as you got to look in the mirror and say, maybe I should change something. Maybe I should take a course. Maybe I should talk to the guy beside me and figure out what it is that he's doing that I'm not. So it's this whole thing of, and this is the saying, this is the saying on our team. Like, are you looking out the window or are you looking in the mirror for your destiny, right?
Mhm.
Because once you take it on, or we find that once you take it on, things happen, right? And sometimes it takes agents a long time to get there. I mean, and blaming and people in general. I mean, we're all like that. You blame the world for your problems until such time as you stop doing that, you can't resolve any of them. I mean, it's a very fundamental thing, but it can be disguised with these lead distribution systems.
Yeah.
Sure.
People such as yourself, I've been going to, because I'm 35 years old. This is my first cycle. I guess I lived through 2008, but I was in school, oblivious to it. You've been through this before, or some version of this before.
Yeah.
What is the messaging you're giving to people in our industry, the individuals on your team, in order to come out on the right end of
Well,
this?
it's where we started the conversation, which is, you can't just keep chasing shiny new beads. You'll never get anywhere. You got to pick one strategy, and we talked about the core strategy of prospecting and 2-minute conversations, etc., and stick on it and master it until it works. And mastery doesn't happen in a week or a month or 6 months. I mean, you can go a long time. We have agents that come in here and do, sometimes some agents start very quickly, and counterintuitively, some agents it takes them a long time to start, but they seem to be the better agents because they spend a long time in skill set development and in humility. And they're the type that need to know the answer before they can say an answer. And that takes a certain amount of gestation in the field for them to be able to. I'm not sure. I think I'm getting off of your question, but I would say, I mean, this is an older guy's answer, but go back to the fundamentals. Like that's what works. It amazes me how little this business has changed. I mean, our agents now are doing the same exact thing that I did like 30 years ago to develop business. And all that happened in the meantime was once in a while you'd get distracted by a shiny bead that took you off of a viable business plan. It really hasn't changed.
Yeah. I think you've obviously influenced Peter a lot. You described your schedule when you first got in the business, and it was all prospecting all day. And then I think you had a couple blocks in the evening.
Yeah.
Peter put it to me, I think the best way I've ever heard it. So you're a new agent, you have no appointments. You have no one to meet with. So what do? You literally prospect for business all day. And someone's typical day is 8 hours. That's when I worked a job.
Yeah.
I work for 8 hours, 5 days a week. If someone could just come into this business and prospect for 8 hours, 5 days a week when they're starting out, they would not fail.
You would have more business. You could be a horrendous closer. You could know very little about houses. You could have a problem with dressing properly. You could have an old car, and your advertisements could all look like garbage, and you would do just fine. And there are many examples of that. But it's human nature, or it seems to be human nature, to avoid all that. And Peter's real value add is not to tell you how to prospect. It's to create an environment where it's normalized so that people can get where they want to go. and to foster that and to foster the belief in the success of it. And it sounds like a simple thing to do. It's very far from a simple thing to do. I mean, just try and make yourself do it for 8 hours. I mean, nobody's doing it for 8 hours a day, nor does anybody need to. I'm talking on the order of 2 or 3. If somebody did that for 2 or 3 hours, 5 days a week, they would fill their hats. And I know that to be true. Because when I did it, many, many more people were doing it because it was just the way of it. I think now it's starting again because, deals aren't just falling out of the sky anymore, right?
For sure. Yeah, well, I know you're incredibly busy. I don't want to take up too much of your time.
No.
I want to end by letting you know how much you impact me, and impact our industry as a whole. I think the greatest compliment is maybe not the one someone gives to your face, but what they say behind your back. And I'm not kidding when I tell you a lot of people behind your backs are saying some amazing things about you.
Well, I'm
from within your organization and outside.
Well, I'm very, very complimented by that. And, truthfully, that's been my ambition.
I think you've accomplished that.
Well, thank you very much. You made my day.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon. Take care.
Yeah, you too.
Every day I'm hustling. Every day I'm hustling. Every day I'm hustling. Every day I'm